Hey everyone, it's Dave from Dave's Ohio Barbecue and more. Today we are going to be making a prime rib roast on the pellet grill. Stick around. So this holiday season, I decided I wanted to try something different for Christmas dinner. We've been doing ham for the past several years, and I love a good ham, but you know, repetition, it's getting boring. So this year what I decided to do was I decided to experiment a little bit with a prime rib roast. So before I started with this prime rib, I wanted to make sure I had everything figured out properly. So I actually tweeted my favorite television chef, Michael Simon. You may know him from Burgers, Brew, and Q, or he's also on Iron Chef sometimes. I wanted to know if boneless or bone-in would be better. And I wanted to know how far in advance he salted his prime rib as well. So I sent him a tweet, and he responded that I should do bone-in, and I should definitely salt the head. So that's what I'm going to do. A couple things about a prime rib roast. It's got the word prime right in it. That does not necessarily mean that the cut of meat you're getting is prime quality meat. In fact, if you see this one here that I got, I picked it up at Costco. It's about a 10-pounder, a little bit over 10 pounds. This is actually choice grade meat, which is a step below prime. I talked to the butcher and he said it was a pretty high choice. And when I looked at the marbling and stuff, it did actually look pretty well marbled, especially for choice. So I went ahead and got it anyway. Plus, it was a little bit cheaper than when they had the actual prime rib there. So I was okay with it. And besides, this is just sort of my pre-Christmas experiment to see how well this works. Now, as you can see by the price of this, not exactly a cheap cut of meat, all right? I spent over $100 on this 10-pounder here, and you know, you really don't want to screw it up. First thing you need to do one of these things is you need to get rid of any hard fat and any silver skin. There's couple areas where you can see the real kind of hard fat just kind of pulls off, and some of that silver skin stuff, when I'm peeling off the fat, you can see it kind of looks almost like cellophane ripping off of the meat. You want to remove as much of that as you can. Leave a little bit because, especially since it's a choice cut, you do want some of that meat to sort of melt and kind of baste the prime rib. On a prime cut of meat, there'd be more marbling inside, and that wouldn't be as crucial. But if you're using choice, you do want to leave a little bit of a fat cap just so that it can, you know, kind of melt in and baste the meat a little bit. So I like to salt my meat the night before. It gives the salt time to absorb into the meat, and I think it adds a better flavor overall. It also helps to break down some of the muscle a little bit. It's just kind of like a natural tenderizer. I use about a ½ teaspoon of salt per pound. So I'm using about 5 teaspoons of kosher salt here on my prime rib. And I spread it all over, and you can see I got started spreading it around here. And I noticed that there was still some big chunks of fat over here by the bone. So I decided to kind of cut that off and cut some of the meat out in between the bones. They call it, you know, the French cut. This is not by any means a French cut. I did a really sloppy, quick cut on it just to kind of expose some of the bones a bit. Once I have it all salted, I chuck it into the fridge. I'm going to leave it uncovered overnight. You'll see in the morning when I take it out, the salt has all been dissolved. It's no more of those big granules of salt on the surface of the meat. It just kind of got absorbed by its own juices, and now it's inside the meat, which is where you want it. For the rub that we're going to be doing today, it's mostly a black pepper based rub. I've got a 1/4 cup of coarse ground black pepper, and on top of that I add about 1.5 tablespoons of kosher salt. Now you might say that's awfully low amount of salt. Well, I've already salted it. The meat already is going to have a salty quality to it. I don't really want to go overboard with it. I'm just looking for a little bit of flavor. On top of that, I put a 1.5 tablespoons of granulated garlic, and then I also put a heaping tablespoon of paprika in there as well. Mixed it all together, and I put it into an empty shaker bottle I had, and then it's time to apply it to the beef. Before I go and put the seasoning on this prime rib, I actually want to tie it up a little bit. I'm going to take some kitchen twine. I'm just going to do a couple loops, you know, in between the bones here. The reason is you want it to hold its shape, because when that fat in there starts rendering out, it could kind of get deformed and kind of slump over, but you want to keep that nice shape for when you cut it. So just tie it up. When you do your knots, just twist the twine around itself a couple times. That way it'll hold when you pull it tight. And then just, you know, tie it in a bow or a knot at top. You're going to cut it off later, so it doesn't really matter. Now, before you apply it to the beef, you do want to put some sort of binder on there. In the past, I've used mustard. I've seen people use hot sauce, Worcestershire sauce. There's all sorts of things you can use. Today, I'm just going to be using olive oil. Make sure all the surfaces have a nice coating of olive oil on there. Try not to get any on the counter like I just did. And then once you have it all coated with oil, you want to shake a nice even coating. Now, I really like the bark on prime rib. You know, when you get a big cut of prime rib from the restaurant, it's got that kind of salty, peppery bark on it. That's like my favorite part. So I'm going to go pretty heavy with this rub on it, but you put as much or as little as you want on there, and you should be fine. For smoking this thing, we're going to be doing this on my Louisiana Grills LG900, and I'm going to be running competition blend, which is just mostly hickory with some maple and other woods chucked in there. We're going to be running it today at about 225, but when I turn my grill on, it starts off at 360, gets everything heated up, gets all the metal and everything up to temperature, and then I turn it down to 225 and let it just kind of naturally come to that temperature. It's just what the manufacturer recommends, and that's how I've been doing it. And for this today, I'm using a bone-in roast. You can get them from the butcher with the bone cut off and then tied back on. Some people claim that the bone adds a certain amount of flavor to it. I've never really encountered that. What I think it serves more of a purpose is it works as like a heat sink. The bones absorb heat at a different rate, and it kind of helps to, you know, kind of insulate the meat a little bit on that side. So I tend to put that side with the bones towards the fire. That way it doesn't get blasted as much by all that intense heat. I've got the meat probe from the LG900 into the center of the cut here, and I'm going to set it at about 120 degrees as my finish temperature. Now, that's kind of rare for me. I'm more of a medium guy, medium rare. By setting it to 120, you're going to have about 10 degrees of carryover once you're done with this piece of meat. And what carryover is, you take it off the grill, you put it inside to rest, and the temperature will keep rising for about 10 degrees. So it's going to finish at around 130. I'm probably going to pull it at about 125 probably, and then let it go up to 135, which is a nice medium. If you want it a little bit lower, you can stop it at 115, 120. If you want it a little bit more, you can pull it at 130, 135. It's all up to you. And now that that's all done, you just gotta let it rest. And I'm gonna let this rest for at least a half hour. It's such a big hunk of meat, you could probably let it go 45 minutes to an hour and not really worry too much about it.
I put it in this cooler, and then I've just got a bunch of old towels here that I use. I'm gonna lay the towels on top. I actually ended up keeping it in the cooler for well over an hour. And when I took it out, the foil pan that it was in was still, really hot, and it was just like perfect temperature to eat and cut. It was fantastic. So you can actually hold something this size. Now, I've gone as far as holding it for about 2 hours before I slice it up, but an hour, hour and a half is definitely doable.
So to serve this today, I'm going to remove the bones. I'm just going to cut right through the twine and just use the bones as a guide and kind of let it guide my knife down there. Then you can see I have a nice flat surface here that I can tip the prime rib onto on my cutting board. And then it's just a matter of cutting it into as thick a slices as you want. I tend to like them about, between a ½ inch and an inch, nice big juicy slice. I have about 1 pound of meat per person that was coming for dinner tonight. That's usually the rule of thumb. Order a roast that's about 1 pound per person. So if you're having 12 people over, get a 12-pound roast. If you're having 5, get a 5-pound roast. But your times will be different. This has been on my smoker for about 4.5, 5 hours today. So it's a pretty long cook.
I posted a quick video of myself cutting this on Instagram, and it got a lot of feedback. Everyone was really, really loving the way this turned out. My friend Julian, who's a butcher and a chef in New York, his account is called Kitchen Classics. He told me that it looked perfect color and doneness all the way through and no bullseye, overcooked to raw. It was tippy top shelf. And another great comment I got from Maddie and Kiki. They're a team of barbecuers. I think they're officially sponsored by Weber. They told me that it looked fantastic, perfectly cooked, and that I nailed it. So a lot of love on Instagram for this one. It turned out great. It turned out even better than I expected it to turn out. I definitely am going to make this one again.
Now, prime rib is great, but it is even better if you have a couple of, what do you want to call them, dips? I don't know, a couple of things to add to the side. And today I'm going to add some au jus, which just is French for with juice. Basically beef juice, and then I'm also going to have some horseradish dip. For the Au jus, what you need to do to begin is take a little bit of olive oil in a pot, heat it up. You're going to saute about 1/4 cup of red onion in it until they're nice and caramelized. You're really looking for the pot to have all those brown marks on the bottom of it. Then add about a teaspoon of garlic, put that in there and stir it around for about a minute. Then you need 1/8 of a cup of white wine. That's going to deglaze the pot because you really want all those bits and pieces down there to kind of, go into a solution so that they add all the flavor from the onions and the garlic back into the finished liquid. So make sure you scrape it down with whatever you have to scrape your pot with. You're going to add about a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce into there. Okay. And then you need about 2½ cups of beef stock. Add it in, mix everything up, get it all combined, bring it up to a boil, and then simmer it for about 3 minutes. You don't want all those onion chunks and garlic floating around in your finished au jus. So I take it and I strain it out, and then you can put it back into the pot and just reheat it when you need it, or keep it warm until you're ready to serve. If you want to thicken it up a little bit, you can make a cornstarch slurry with about a teaspoon of cornstarch and maybe even some water just to tighten it up. Or if you know that, you can use a teaspoon of flour and some water. Make a slurry, make sure all the flour is dissolved. Dump it in there and then cook it for another 4 or 5 minutes until it starts to thicken just a little bit. This is not supposed to be syrup. It's supposed to be more of a liquid. As for the horseradish sauce, that's just really simple. It starts off with a 1/2 cup of sour cream. Add 2 tablespoons of prepared shredded horseradish, drained. You don't want it really wet. Add 2 tablespoons of mayo, 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. You can see I'm just kind of eyeballing this. And then 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and then optional, you can take some chives and chop them up and mix them in there as well. Mix that up, refrigerate it, give it some time for the flavors all to meld together, and then that is the perfect side dip for prime rib. So there you have it, the perfect prime rib, whether you're making it for the holidays or just for a special occasion. It is so good, so tasty, so juicy. You get that nice, even medium all the way through, that pink blush color all the way through it. Just so good. Make sure you subscribe to me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Dave's Ohio Barbecue, and I'm also on Facebook. Just look up the group Dave's Ohio Barbecue and you should be able to find it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, hit that bell so that you get notifications every time I make a new video. We've got a lot of new videos coming out soon. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.